This week on Sprague Woodturning, I'm going to take this gnarly looking piece of walnut and turn it into a wood-turned clamshell box. That's the plan anyway. That's next. All right, so before we cut this up, I thought I'd show you my beautiful piece of wood here. Oh, it is. She's rough. And some sort of dry rot there. So my plan with this is we're going to cut this off like so. Let me get my template. Give me a second. So this is the template that we're going to use, and this is for my ice cream buckets that I like to use. Yeah, I mean, it's such a really weird piece of wood. I don't like the fact that we've got all these gigantic cracks, and I really don't want this stuff, whatever that is. You see, it doesn't bend very far. So we'll use this as a template, and yeah, I think that's going to work well. Once I get this cut down level, then we'll be able to throw this on top and round it for a bucket. But yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you, you can use virtually anything when you're casting epoxy. Anyway, let's go over to the bandsaw and get this cut up, and we'll go from there. Sorry, I forgot to turn the camera on for this cut. That's not a first. So yeah, that's not a very good start. Welcome to the video, everyone. I do upload every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And whenever possible, I turn my videos into premieres so that we can watch the piece being made on the TV and you're able to comment while watching it. So yeah, I know I'm a broken record here. It is important to remove the bark, as much bark as possible. Sometimes it's, it's on there really, really well and it's really difficult to remove. But whenever possible, it is always a good idea to remove any bark. I will say that the inside of this was just packed full of, it almost looked like dirt. So, yeah. Well, let me tell you, boys and girls, she's pretty rough. Man, digging and digging, there's not going to be much left of this. I keep going. All right, let's go over to the flap sander of the lathe and see if we can clean this up good enough to get it cast. I'm worried about having all kinds of material coming out of this. So anyway, let's see what we can do with the flap sander. If you're new to my channel, this flap sander is made from old belts from my Supermax drum sander. And I just cut them into probably about 10-inch strips and then ripped them in half after I drilled a hole. And that's it. I mean, it goes into a Jacob's chuck and it works actually very, very well. But it's just so much material inside of this, and it really is so important to remove all that you can. That way, of course, you're not going to have any floaties in your epoxy. That's why you wear the gloves. So if I hadn't been wearing gloves there, I might have lost a little bit of skin. So, yeah, it's always best to wear gloves when you're doing this kind of stuff. That cleans up really nice. Lots of compressed air. We're going to use a cut down 11.4 liter ice cream bucket. And I'm going to glue it down because I don't want a weight on the top interfering with what our design may be. Let's mix up some epoxy. We've got a fairly deep casting this week, so we're going to be using deep casting epoxy from Design Epoxy. And of course, if you've been around for a while, you know that this is my go-to epoxy. Absolutely love it. Link in the description. Since this is an ocean themed project, we're going to be using Caribbean Blue. Caribbean Blue is certainly one of the more popular blues that I use here on the channel. Sapphire Blue's probably ahead of it, and Blue Laguna is probably, well, I don't know if it's ahead of this one, but it's close. But it's Caribbean Blue this week. All right, I'm going to assume that it's going to take more than this, but this is 1.5 liters. Yeah, it's going to take another one for sure. Be right back. All right, here's another 1.5. Well, that is not going to be enough either. Yeah, I'll mix up 3/4 of a liter and I'll be back. All right, this should do it. Well, it is going to do it because I'm not going to put any more in. So that's 3 3/4 of a liter. Vacuum chamber coming up next. All right, here we go. If you're new to epoxy casting, I'll briefly explain why I'm using a vacuum chamber. The wood is submerged in the epoxy. When you pull a vacuum on it, it sucks all of the air out of the wood. And then when you release the vacuum, the fluid is drawn into the wood, essentially stabilizing. That's really what I'm trying to do, harden up those punky areas so that we can do something with it. That is full vacuum, 28 inches of vacuum. I'll just keep doing this for about a half hour and then I'll bring it back. All right, that's been 45 minutes. So you can see the bubbles have dropped off substantially. Anyway, I'm going to release the vacuum, throw it into the pressure pot, and I'm going to check on this in the morning. And if it's still liquidy enough, maybe we'll add another color. But we'll have to see. I definitely need it to go into the pressure pot because that's really punky and it needs to be filled in. So just pulled this out of the pressure pot and it looks like it has lifted. There was not that kind of gap here before. I'm sure that should be down a lot more. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'll have to go back and review the footage, but I'm pretty sure that it has moved. And the other thing too is 16 hours later, we can't do anything with this, can't do another pour. I could do another pour on top of this as it sits, but you know, it'll never match up. So whatever this is, we'll work with what we got and hopefully we can make something of it. Anyway, I'll let that sit for another 2 days and we'll see what becomes of it. Bummer. Okay, well, here's what we're looking at. Yeah. Let's get this out and see if it did lift. I'm pretty sure that it did. There shouldn't be this much space here. Anyway, hopefully we can salvage whatever's going on here. Yeah, it did. Man, that's disappointing. It's pretty beautiful epoxy though. What do we do here? Looks like my clamshell box is going to be a lot smaller than I originally thought it was going to be. You're probably going to hear machinery running in the background. They are in the process of putting the new driveway in for the house that's being built right next door here. So that and contractor noises with nail guns, you're probably going to hear it all. All right, well anyway, let's get some centers. We'll get this mounted on the lathe and we'll figure out exactly, well, yeah, it may still work for us, but I was really hoping to have something this deep, but looks like it might be only this deep. Now this may look a little odd. This is going to be turned away. My focus should be on the edge of this, or just maybe a little off center, and then hopefully we'll incorporate more wood like that. It's definitely going to be out of balance. This took me a little bit to figure out. When I first started resin casting, I would run into issues like this, and then I had a tendency to center the, center it on the blank itself. But, in reality, you want to center it on the wood and not the blank because, well, if you're going to turn it away, there's no point in centering it on the blank. Well, it's not that bad. I can get to 750. So yeah, 750 RPM, and we're going to start off with a number 3 Hercules from Hunter Tool Systems. Link in the description below. So let's have a chat about why this happened, what went wrong. First off, I think that I didn't put enough hot melt glue down to hold it in place. That's probably the big one. I should have used Dwayne. Dwayne really wouldn't affect the look of this because I'm going to kind of flatten it on the top anyway. And if you're new to my channel, you don't know what Dwayne is. Dwayne's just a big rock, granite rock that I put on top of my castings. And because it's a rock, we've named it Dwayne. So if I had to use that, it definitely would have kept this casting down in the bucket and we wouldn't be dealing with this. In a way, if you're going for a clamshell look, you're probably not going to want a real tall casting anyway if you're kind of going for like a closed clamshell look. So in a way, maybe it was a blessing. But anyway, as they say, live and learn. And in the end, I really like the look of this piece, and hopefully you guys do as well. So I'll just briefly talk about last week's project, and that is that walnut kind of basket case bowl that I used the red in last week, if you remember. I absolutely love that bowl. It was a popular video too, thanks to those who watched it. And if you happen to miss it, I will link it at the end of this video. And along with that, I also did the first house build video as well. I know that YouTube has a habit of taking notifications off, so if you missed that, that is also up on my channel right now. I will link last week's wood turning project at the end of this video, and well, I might be able to link the house one too. So anyway, look for those links at the end of this video if you happen to miss it, and thanks to those who did watch it. And I guess I will give you an update on the house here. Right now, they are waiting on trusses. All of the exterior walls are up. They actually have all of the Tyvek or house wrap on. We're just waiting for trusses. Usually, the way my builder told me, they send the floor trusses, and then about a week later, they usually send the roof trusses. And for whatever reason, there seems to be a delay in that. So I don't know what's going on there. Hopefully they show up either today. Today's Thursday, or today or tomorrow, and then that way they'll be able to move forward with it. But pretty soon, other than just building in the basement, they're not going to be able to do anything. They're going to be held up until them trusses show up. So, but at least all the walls are up. There is still a lot of landscaping going on. Hopefully by the end of this week, the driveway will be in. My 100-meter long driveway. So anyway, that's what's going on at the house, and progress, people, we're getting there. And there's the first indication as to what this piece is going to look like. Yeah, there are some straightish lines in there, and possibly I could have left that on the bottom, but it just, with it being tilted the way it was, it just did not look good to me. I couldn't do it. Sorry. I know there's probably some people that are probably saying that they would have left it. Just showing that I ground the little nub off of that resin tenon so that I can mount it in chuck. Since it's just wood sticking up out of the top of this, I'm going to be using the 5/8 bowl gouge from David Ellsworth just to, get rid of the majority of it. I'm kind of in get her done mode here. I'm not really paying too much attention to my cuts. And I'll briefly explain the difference between high-speed steel and carbide for the non-turners that are watching. I keep forgetting that, there is a lot of non-turners that do watch my content. So a normal gouge will have high-speed steel in it, and you know, if you're working with just straight wood, that's my choice. I mean, you'll see me if I'm just working with wood projects. I'm going to be using the Ellsworth gouge all day long. That's my favorite gouge. However, when you start working with epoxy, and when it essentially stabilizes the wood, well, it's a really tough thing to cut. And this is where these carbide tips that go on the end of the Hercules here are king. They will hold their edge and you won't need to sharpen them. These are replaceable cutters, and I mean, they just work so much better with working with epoxy compared to high-speed steel. So we're just going to rough this up with some 60 grit, and then we'll get our glue block on the bottom of this with lots of volume so that we don't have any adhesion issues. I usually leave it about 10 or 15 minutes before I trim the waste blocks up. I should mention that this is a white birch cross grain glue block that I'm putting on here, and I like using birch because it's a soft hardwood, so you can get a good bite on it with the chuck. And I should mention that I am also using dovetail chuck jaws. Okay, well, let's get a look at this with some denatured alcohol and see what our epoxy looks like before we make any decisions. Yes, indeed. That's nice. Yeah, big epoxy pocket over on this side. Very cool. I think I'm going to make this the top. There seems to be more interesting stuff happening on this side. So this is going to be the top, and this is going to be the bottom. And I'm going to split this right down the middle. And we'll have to turn a tenon in here so that it will fit, so that the lid will fit down onto the base. But yeah, I'm just going to go right in the center, groove it in, and well, we'll see how we make out. So whatever I do to this piece, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to do the same thing on the top and the bottom, and try to always keep that centered. It's funny, I drew the line on there, and I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't even trim this piece yet. So I figured I'd trim it up and then put the line back on it again. So we're going to use the parting tool from Crown. This is the 3/16 inch one. And then you'll also see me switch out to a thinner parting tool after we get down in here. Yeah, equal amounts off of each side, just trying to make things symmetrical. That is the Cub Point straight tool. Again, having a hard time getting the Hercules down in that area, so that's a good tool for that, with that exposed cutter most of the way around it. There is some danger here. If that cutter happens to hit the other side that you're working on, well, yeah, you're probably not going to like the results of that. But anyway, once I got that opened up, I switched back to the Hercules. And again, trying to make things symmetrical. That's the goal here. This actually turned beautifully. Not a lot of chip out once things were running true. And yeah, I mean, for walnut is I don't know, it's not a soft hardwood, it's probably a medium hardwood. But of course, once that epoxy penetrates it, it really does make it a lot harder to work with. But it did turn beautifully. So while you watch me do this, I'll briefly talk about pressure pots and epoxy and how it behaves. So, you know, for the most part, designer epoxy is really the only epoxy that I've ever worked with. I don't see any need to go anywhere else because I love the way that this epoxy works. But, you know, epoxies seem to behave differently when under pressure. And if I had left this casting just sitting on the bench, I'm pretty sure that the next day it would have been liquidy enough for us to come back and put another color in. But because this piece of wood was so bad, I mean, I really felt that I had to put it under pressure. I would have, I definitely needed to make sure that it was solid, and using the pressure pot along with the vacuum chamber will do that. But, I've noticed it over the years using this product, and I'm going to assume that it's the same for all epoxies, that, once you get an epoxy and you're using it, you know how it behaves, then you can understand it and you know what your limits are. In the future coming up here, we'll find a small little thermal crack in the center of this, which really kind of surprised me. And I think the combination of the temperature and it being under pressure is the main reason why I had that. It's no big deal, but it's one of those things that I didn't think should have happened with a pour of this volume. Anyway, send your thoughts, leave your thoughts down below on that. And if you've noticed any differences with your epoxies that you're using, if you're using Designer Epoxy or another brand, I'm very curious. For those who followed the new workshop build series, I haven't done anything in the workshop. I've just been too busy filming content for the house build and, of course, my regular content. So, one of these days I got to get those bowls off of my shop floor and get some equipment bought so that we can do some other things. But right now I need to get my seat container moved and put into position, and then I need to do a bunch of work on it before we can get all those bowls off the shop floor. You'll see it at the end if you haven't seen it before. So anyway, I'm just kind of working on design here, again, making sure everything is even on both sides before I decide to cut this piece in half. That is, again, another really thin parting tool from Crown. I just going a little ways with this. I find you lose mechanical advantage pretty quickly on this, and you've got to have a really firm grip on this tool or else it can get ripped out of your hand. Trust me, I know. Breaking out the Sawzall to do this, I kept rotating the piece and cutting a little further. I find that that's the easiest way to make sure that you're centered on the cut and not going to be way off when you get down to the bottom. But the Sawzall works really good for this. A lot easier than a handsaw, that's for sure. Start with the lid first. So the lid here has the glued on tenon, and that's not ever an issue, but you can still knock something free here for sure. But the tenon that's for the base is all epoxy, and I just I've done this a number of times, and I know that having epoxy tenons can be iffy. In this case, what I found was, these chucks have so much clamping pressure that, this was shot over 3 days, 4 days. And every time I put it on, I had to tighten the chuck just a little bit more on that epoxy because it would eventually just kind of succumb to that, that pressure that the jaws are making on it. So watch out for that when you're using epoxy tenons. And we'll see here in a clip coming up when I start working on the base that I almost do lose it off the lathe, and that's primarily due to the fact that I'm using an epoxy tenon and probably can't get that great of a grip on it either. That's the other thing. But like I said, a couple days into it, it will start really biting into it, and you got to check the chuck. But when you first put it in there, yeah, make sure you have a look at it. And there's that little thermal crack that I was talking about earlier. I was really surprised to see that. And again, that's in an area where it was trapped. The epoxy couldn't regulate its heat. And if you're going to find thermal cracks, experience tells me now that you're going to find them in these voids. So, yeah, I could have maybe thrown this in the fridge, but honestly, I just didn't think it was going to be an issue. Back again with the Badger Cub straight tool. I do want to kind of get up underneath that lid. This piece, both of these halves are actually fairly beefy. I would say probably 5/8 to a ½ inch in thickness, thereabouts. And as I went deeper into this, I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to try something a little different. Usually I would use thin CA to do this. And this time I'm going to do medium. So I sprayed a little bit accelerator down on the crack. Then I kind of held it on the crack and pushed it in. And the great thing about using medium and thick is it typically doesn't foam up like the thin stuff does. And that's every CA glue that I've ever worked with. But really liking this Flash Bond CA that Designer Epoxy is selling now. And if you want to try some, please use code InlayGymCA, and that will help out the channel. So yeah, it's still there. Eventually, I think I fill this another time. And after that, I think I wait till I'm starting to sand and then, fill it from there. So that is a small skew. It was a skew gouge that I've made into a skew, and it does really good on these flat surfaces and for cutting tenons, sharp tenons, and cleaning up the bottoms of them. Speaking of skews, I actually got my skew from Crown, my 5/8 round skew, just exactly the same like the one you seen there, but larger. So I'm looking forward to using that next time I'm doing some center work. Honestly, the skew kind of scares me a little bit, but it's something that I need to move forward with and learn the skew. So yeah, well, maybe I'll show that live here at some point. But anyway, I'm just going to take very light cuts on this. Don't want to change the profile on this at all. Just trying to smooth things out as best we can before we start sanding. And these are the 3.5 inch double discs from sandpaper.ca. I'm going to sand to 600. So I'm going to start at 60 and go to 600. And just trying a little experiment to see if I can see any difference between that and 800 prior to buffing. And that is triple buffing compound, and theoretically this should give us 1,000 to 1,200 grit surface. And don't forget that denatured alcohol. Very, very important step. We will put the sealer coat on the lid the same time that I put it on the base. I didn't see the point in doing them differently. As far as the base is concerned, things were pretty routine. One thing that I found interesting, so usually when you have a casting that's kind of epoxy heavy on one side, it tends to be out of balance. And, being able to do 750 right out the start is good. But, you'll see I'll be able to go up to 1230 here in a short while. And that's a little surprising because of that heavy epoxy on one side. But anyway, it must have been that the walnut with the epoxy in it and the epoxy were a good match weight wise, or else you wouldn't be able to do that kind of speed. Little bit of sign language for you there. So yeah, we're up to 1230. I typically don't go any higher than this unless it's really small stuff. Like bottle stoppers, I'll go as high as 3,000. When I was making bottle stoppers. I'm not anymore. But yeah, 1230 is usually about as high as I go. Now the catch is coming up here, and again, I'm in get her done mode, and coming to the end of a fairly long day, and of course you just you want to move on with your life. So the problem is when you get aggressive like this on the lathe, right there, it didn't look like much, but it was enough to pop that free in the chuck. So I just loosened the chuck off, and luckily it didn't damage the tenon. That's another big issue if that happens. But after that, I just take little nibbling cuts, and I cut down on the aggressiveness because, well, it's not going to work for you when you're working with epoxy. So this is a little on the thicker side, and well, that's just the way I like it. I like a turning with some mass. So this is probably 5/8 of an inch in thickness, thereabouts. Might vary throughout the piece. Out at the edge, of course, you're not going to be able to thin that out. I mean, I didn't really see the benefit of that, so I never bothered to do it. And of course, the thinner things get, the more you wash the color out of it, as demonstrated by the holoform that didn't survive. So anyway, I'm fitting the lid here. I'm not exactly 100% happy with the fit of the lid, but you know, I do eventually get it. You need to leave some slack in these lids, because if you don't, I mean, there is wood in here, and wood does move with the seasons, regardless if it's dry or not. So if you have a fairly tight fitting lid, you may have a hard time getting it off at some point. So it's, you know, 32nd of an inch, I think, is probably where you're probably should be looking at. This is probably a little bit more than that, but it still fits relatively nice, I think, anyway. Yeah, just cleaning up again with that round skew and a little bit of hand sanding as well. I fit the lid on there, and when the two pieces come together, there was a gap, so I had to make that little mortise deeper so that the lid would fit down on it properly. Same process as the lid. For this, we're going to use the universal tung oil sealer from Waterlux. Waterlux recommends using this under the original coat. This is especially a thing with walnut. I find that if you use the sealer coat on the walnut, the original will perform better. Well, there it is with the sealer wiped off. It's always that resin staining. When I first started doing this, you know, I wasn't a fan of it, but now I don't know, it just seems to add another layer to it, and you know, you can get an idea of what the epoxy and the wood's going to look like once the shiny stuff goes on tomorrow. Yeah. I want to finish the lid completely, so I've got it mounted on the vacuum chuck right now and just removing that waste block, and then we'll sand it up and get the finish on it as well. So speaking of vacuum chucks, this is how I lost the space holoform. It got destroyed, and a lot of people were saying that, you know, I should be able to do something with it, but in reality, after measuring it, it was garbage. There was nothing that could be done with it, and I wasn't going to do some sort of video on saving it because it wasn't savable. So it's gone in the trash, and I don't like having these things stay around because it makes my blood boil when I look at it. So it's got to go. So I'm just going to finish this by hand, put the sealer coat on, then rub it off. And again, if you never use a sealer coat, make sure you rub it all off, because if you don't, it is a real bear to try and get off the next day after it hardens. There you go. That's what the lid looks like. As soon as I get some light on this. Very nice. All right, well, that's it from me. That's a 7-hour straight turning session. I'm exhausted. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow when we're doing the first coat of original. Tell me what you think. A little hard. It's so dark, isn't it? Just can't really show it to you all that great. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. So before I buff these, I thought I would show you kind of what they look like. Probably very similar to what it was yesterday. Had a little bit of bleed out right here. It's not too much, so we should be able to get rid of that easy enough. Yeah, I mean, that's what that looks like. So that's the lid, of course. And there's the base, probably very similar. All right, so since I've got the vacuum chuck on there right now, I'll use it to buff the inside of the lid, the outside of the lid, and I'll probably put my smaller vacuum chuck on here so that I've got, because I'm just going to do the top part of the lid. I'm not going to do the inside. I will at some point, but I need to make sure the outside of this looks nice for the video, of course. So nothing new here. Going to buff again with the triple E buffing compound, and then of course clean it with the denatured alcohol. And I flipped it around and did the exact same thing on the bottom. Now I'm going to put on my smallest vacuum chuck and use that to hold the lid. That's the original gloss. That's what we're going to put on there now. I get the vacuum on, so that's why I didn't talk to the camera. But, you know, I didn't think that I would use this small vacuum chuck as much as I do, because it works great for instances like this, where you need to put a finish on and then handle it afterwards. Whatever way you can get it off. Well, probably not much of a change from yesterday. And you might hear some construction noises in the background. It's definitely going to need another coat. That end grain on that walnut's really soaking it up. Camera might be able to pick it up there. All right, bottom coming up. And there's the base. You know, again, there's probably not much difference from yesterday, but you can see that it's starting to soak that finish up. So yep, this is going to need a second coat too. Wish I could show that epoxy off better, but I'm having a hard time with lighting. Lighting is always a thing, especially when you're working with darker woods like dark black walnut. So it will, you need a lot of light power to showcase it properly. Again, two-tone look, epoxy staining, love it. Kind of looks like here's like a lake or a pond, and this is like trees around it. Mountains, hills. A wolf. Like a lot of people, I see a lot of things in pieces of wood all the time. Anyway, let me know what you think about this. If you like the profile of this piece. Anyway, there will be another coat, and I will do it the same as this. And we will see you when we're doing the foot. Beauty. So after 2 coats of the original gloss, we're ready to do the bottom on this. I'm thinking in the future, because of what happened with the hollow form, the spaced theme hollow form that I lost off the vacuum chuck, that I think that it's probably a good idea to run just a couple of pieces of electrical tape over this and tape it to the chuck. That way, if you know you lose vacuum, hopefully it's not going to come off the lathe. But anyway, I'll probably end up doing that just to be safe. I know that you can get these backup supplies, but most of them have fans in them, and it's so dusty that it's just not really all that good. So I think the tape is probably a better solution. So the bottom was sanded from 120 to 400, and because we're got some really dark wood here, decided to do some engraving on the bottom. That way it will show up better than just using a straight up pen. Alright, well, that's going to do it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Special shout out to the members. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your support. And if you want to be a member of my channel, it is $2.99 a month to do so. Let's have a last chat about this clamshell box. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what you guys think about this. My interpretation of a clamshell box. Here's the bottom. Messed up the 8 in the stock code. The problem with using the engraver is it wants to follow the grain, so sometimes that's one of the knocks on it. But anyway, no finish on the inside of the lid other than the sealer coat. And of course, pretty nice on the inside of this one here. Should mention the size on this. This really does match up quite nicely too. That's one thing that's really nice about it. It's not It's not off at all, if I can get it there. Can't complain about that as far as the grain lining up. Size on this is 8 inches across, and it is 2 3/4 inches tall. Not a real big thing, not meant to be a real big thing, just kind of one of these keepsakes. And this is going to stay with us. We're going to hold on to this piece. This will go nice in our new house when and if it ever gets built. And anyway, let me know what you think about this piece. I think it's really cool. Don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the next giveaway at 145,000 subscribers. And yes, we're inching there. And of course, that's only open to continental USA and Canada. And speaking of designer epoxy, they are shipping to the States again. The only stipulation is it's epoxy only. That's because it's made totally in Canada. The molds and the pigments, unfortunately, not all of it's made in Canada, so it can't go under the free trade agreement. So you're gonna have to get your pigments elsewhere until this can get all sorted out. For me, shipping wise, I ship Canada Post. Canada Post is currently on strike, and I have no idea when they're going to be back. But by far, they are the cheapest shipper for me to use. So I'm going to wait for them to come back. Hopefully that's sooner than later, and they get stuff sorted out. I got some stuff written down here. I need to check on it. So there's no handle on the top of that, and I mean that's by design. A clamshell shouldn't have a handle on it, so that's why I didn't put one on there before some people ask. The other thing is, I just found out from my builder that the trusses are not arriving till late next week. So anyway, they're in the business. They're in the basement right now, framing up the rooms and putting the stairs into the basement. If the excavator comes back, they'll be able to put the back deck on, the deck portion of it anyway. And then after that, I think they're pretty much held up. Still no word from the concrete guys when they're going to be back to do the garage slab. So that's still another thing that's pending. So we had really hoped that we would have the house at least up, the shell of the house being up, and because my two sons and my daughter-in-law are going to be here for Thanksgiving. And speaking of that, that is next week. I'm going to take some time off and spend it with my family, but there will be a video. And ordinarily I like to save this stuff for bonus content, but I'm going to insert it for next week. Views are usually pretty low Thanksgiving anyway. So that will be the sea container video, offloading that gigantic pile of bowls and prepping it, and putting shells in it, spray foaming the ceiling. So I'm going to show you basically the first step in getting that sea container ready to be used as my drying shed. And again, once the excavator gets back, they can grab it from its current location and drag it. And we're going to put it right on the back of the shop here. I've changed my mind. Originally, I was going to tuck it underneath the future carport that's going to be on the shop here, but I think in this orientation is probably better. So that will be that video for next Friday, so please check that out. And yeah, happy Thanksgiving, because I won't be here next week to wish you that. So I guess that's it. Just let me check my list here. Next week, yeah, Epoxy USA. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, let me know what you think about this week's project. And of course, by leaving a comment down below, you will be entered into my giveaway at 145,000 subscribers when we get there. So please comment away. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you are the winner, I will mail it to you at my expense. All right, well, that's it. I'm out of here. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend. And hopefully, we'll see you back here next week for the sea container conversion video. Take care.